The small town where the mechanic lived was usually quiet, a kind of place where nothing big ever happened. People there knew each other by face, and most days passed without any surprises. The mechanic liked it that way. He enjoyed simple routines, opening his workshop early in the morning, checking the engines that people dropped off a day before, wiping the grease off his hands, and listening to the soft sounds of the forests that surrounded the town. His workshop was nothing fancy, just a wide shed made of wood and metal sheets, with tools hanging on every wall. But to him, it was enough. It was his world, his comfort, and a place where he could work in peace. He never thought his life would be anything more than this. Fixing old engines, repairing tractors for farmers who lived nearby, helping travelers who stopped in town with broken bikes or cars. These things filled his days. Sometimes he would step outside his workshop in the late afternoon, just to stretch his back and breathe the fresh air coming from the tall trees behind the building. He always admired the forest from a safe distance, but he never imagined he would one day walk deep into it for something unusual. That day started like any other. The morning sun made the dust in the air look golden as he opened the workshop door. He dragged the old stool to the center of the room and started, working on an engine that had been giving him trouble since the previous evening. Time passed slowly, and the day was neither too busy nor too quiet. A few people came in for quick repairs. Some just stopped by to talk, and by late afternoon he was alone again. He hummed to himself as he tightened the last bolt on the machine. When he looked up, he saw that the sky had already turned orange. It was time to close up. He turned off the main light, packed away a few tools he had been using, and pushed the large sliding door halfway shut. Usually, by this time, he would head straight home, make a simple dinner, and rest. But the moment he stepped outside, he felt something different in the air. The forest behind the workshop seemed unusually quiet. Even the birds that normally chirped loudly around this time were silent. A strange stillness hung between the trees, as if they were holding their breath. He frowned and paused. He wasn't the type to get scared easily, but he knew the forest well enough to understand its silence meant something wasn't normal. As he locked the door, he heard it very faint, almost too soft to notice, but definitely there. A rustling sound. Not like the wind shaking leaves. Not like small animals running across dry branches. This noise felt heavier, uneven, and slow. He turned around and listened again. There it was, another rustle, followed by a low, painful sound that he could only describe as a struggle for breath. He waited a few seconds, unsure. Wildlife wasn't uncommon here. Deer, foxes, and wild boars often came close to the edge of the town. But this sound was different. It wasn't the sound of an animal running or eating. It sounded like something. Suffering. His first instinct was to walk away. It wasn't his business. The forest had its own rules and its own way of dealing with things. But something inside him refused to ignore what he heard. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe concern, or maybe the simple fact that he had never been the kind of man who could walk away from a living creature in pain. He sighed, shook his head, and grabbed the small flashlight from his pocket. The sun was almost gone, and the darkness under the trees was already thick. He took a few careful steps toward the forest line, shining the light ahead of him. At first he saw nothing but leaves and shadows. He listened again, holding his breath. The rustling came a bit louder this time, and this time it was followed by a soft whimper, a sound he had never heard from any animal before. His heart sped up. He walked deeper, slowly pushing branches to the side, the light trembling slightly in his hand. For a moment he wondered if this was a bad idea. Wild animals could be dangerous, especially if they were hurt. But turning back felt even worse. Something needed help. He could feel it. A few steps in, he froze. The beam of his flashlight stopped on a shape lying on the ground, half hidden behind fallen leaves and broken branches. At first, he didn't understand what he was looking at. The fur was pale, almost glowing white in the darkness. The animal was breathing, but weakly. Its body shook every few seconds, as if it was trying to move but couldn't. He raised the flashlight a little bit, and the shape became clearer. The head, the ears, the long tail. And then the truth hit him so hard, he almost dropped the light dot. It was a leopard, but not just any leopard. Its fur was white, marked only by faint, almost silver-like spots. Its eyes reflected the light in a soft, ghostly glow. An albino leopard, something he had only heard about, something rarely seen in the wild. He felt his legs turn stiff. His breath caught in his throat. Never in his life had he stood this close to such a powerful creature. Even injured, it was huge, and he knew very well what these animals were capable of. Every instinct in him screamed to step back slowly, to get out of there before it woke up fully. But fear stopped him only for a moment. As he adjusted the flashlight, he saw what was wrong. The animal's leg was twisted at an unnatural angle, covered in dirt and dried blood. It must have fallen, or been caught in something sharp. The leopard tried to shift its weight, but collapsed again, letting out a low cry that pierced straight through him. He swallowed hard. The forest was silent around them. No one else was there. No wildlife officers, no rescue teams, no experts who knew how to handle wild animals. Just him. He took a slow step forward, his voice soft and steady even though his hands were shaking. He didn't know if the leopard could understand anything he said, but he spoke anyway, hoping his tone would make a difference. "It's okay. I'm not here to hurt you." The leopard opened its eyes fully, watching him with a mix of fear and exhaustion. It didn't growl. It didn't bare its teeth. It simply watched him, too weak to fight or flee. He crouched down a meter away, close enough to see the injury clearly, but far enough to jump back if the animal reacted. The broken leg was serious. If he left it here, it wouldn't survive the night. Predators, cold, infection, anything could end its life. He knew he had to make a decision, and he had to make it fast. He looked at his own jacket, then at the leopard again. It was risky, maybe even foolish, but he couldn't walk away. He spoke softly again. "I'm going to help you, all right? Just don't panic." He slowly removed his jacket and held it in his hands like a sling. Every movement was slow, so he wouldn't startle the animal. The leopard watched him the whole time, breathing hard, its eyes dull with pain. When he moved closer, the animal flinched but didn't strike. Using gentle motions, he slid the jacket under its body, careful not to touch the injured leg. The leopard growled faintly, not in anger but in pain. He felt his heart squeeze at the sound. "Easy? I know." He whispered then he lifted He wasn't a strong man, but adrenaline and determination filled his arms. The leopard was heavy, much heavier than he expected. He struggled for balance, took a deep breath, and adjusted his grip. The animal's head rested weakly against his shoulder. For a second, he felt its breath on his neck, warm and shaky. Step by step, he carried it out of the forest. Each step felt like a decision. Each breath felt like a promise he couldn't break. He didn't know if he would succeed. He didn't know if this choice would cost him injury or worse. But he kept walking because something deep inside him knew this moment would change everything. And when he finally stepped into the faint light of the workshop behind him, the world suddenly felt different, not because he had rescued a rare animal, but because something in him had awakened. A sense of responsibility, a silent bond, something he didn't fully understand yet, but he would. In time, he would. When he reached the edge of his workshop with the injured leopard in his arms, the weight of what he was doing finally hit him. The animal was rare, powerful, and completely helpless. A normal person would have run in the opposite direction. But he wasn't thinking about what made sense. He was thinking about the creature breathing weakly against his shoulder. The workshop's light spilled out onto the ground, making everything around him look softer than it really was. He carefully lowered the leopard onto an old, thick blanket he used whenever he worked on large machinery. The animal let out a low growl, not out of anger, but because of the pain shooting through its leg. He stepped back a little, giving it room, and took a deep breath. He had seen many injuries in his life: cuts from metal sheets, burns from hot engines, bruises from lifting heavy tools. But this was different. This was a living creature from the wild, something people rarely even saw with their own eyes. He knelt down near the blanket, keeping his movements slow and calm. "It's okay. You're safe here," he whispered softly. The leopard's ears twitched slightly at the sound of his voice. Its breathing was heavy, uneven, and its eyes kept drifting open and closed. He felt a strange mixture of fear and responsibility settle inside him. He didn't know anything about treating wild animals, but he knew he couldn't let it suffer. Not when destiny had placed the creature right in front of him. He walked toward his small shelf, where he kept basic supplies: clean cloth, warm water, some old towels, and a first aid box he rarely used. His hands moved quickly, but his mind felt like it was carrying 1,000 questions. Would the leopard trust him? Was he doing the right thing? And most importantly, could he actually save it? He grabbed his phone and searched for the number of the nearest veterinarian. The vet lived far outside town, and it was already late in the evening, but he dialed anyway. After a few rings, the vet answered, sounding tired. "I'm sorry to call so late," he said quietly, keeping his voice low so he wouldn't frighten the animal. "I found an injured animal. What kind?" The vet asked. There was a long pause from his side before he finally said it. "A leopard." The line went silent for a second. "A leopard? Are you sure?" "Yes, a white one. I think it's albino." The vet's voice changed immediately. He sounded shocked, almost worried. He explained that albino leopards were extremely rare and needed delicate care. But the vet couldn't come. It was too far, too dark, and he didn't have the equipment for a wild animal anyway. So he did the next best thing. He guided the mechanic step by step on what to do. "Keep the environment quiet," the vet said. "Don't make sudden movements. And try not to touch the injured leg directly. It's severely fractured." The mechanic nodded, even though the vet couldn't see him. "And most importantly," the vet added, "if the animal shows signs of panic or aggression, step away immediately. These creatures can be dangerous, even when hurt." He thanked the vet, ended the call, and slowly returned to the leopard. The animal watched him with tired but alert eyes. He could sense a silent fear in them, the fear of a creature who didn't understand what was happening, but still hoped for relief. He dipped a cloth in warm water and wrung it out. Then, sitting a little distance away, he held out the cloth so the leopard could see it. He didn't touch the animal at first. He waited, letting the leopard smell the air and understand that he meant no harm. When he finally placed the cloth near the animal's body, the leopard flinched slightly. He stopped and waited. After a moment, when it relaxed a bit, he gently cleaned the dirt and dried blood around its broken leg. Every time the cloth touched the area, the animal's muscles tensed, and he whispered soothingly, "Just a little more. It's going to help you." He worked slowly, carefully, as if each movement might break something precious. The workshop felt unbelievably quiet. The only sounds were the leopard's breathing and the gentle dripping of water. Once the leg was clean, he looked at the twisted angle again. It made his chest tighten. Setting a bone was something he had never done. But he remembered the vet's instructions: support the limb, make sure the animal doesn't panic, and try to stabilize it. He wrapped the leg with soft cloth first, using his hands as lightly as possible. The leopard tensed and let out a low rumble, but it didn't try to attack. It almost felt like the animal understood that he was trying to help. He spoke again. "I know it hurts. I'm sorry. Just a little longer." He found a few wooden pieces he normally used to support large machine parts, measured them roughly, and cut them into splint-shaped strips. As he prepared everything, he kept glancing at the leopard. The animal watched his movements, breathing slowly, staying awake as if afraid to fall asleep. He placed the splints on either side of the leg, then wrapped them with more cloth. The leopard hissed softly, pain flashing through its body, and he felt guilt rise in his chest. But he kept going. If he stopped now, all the effort would be wasted. When he finally finished securing the splint, he sat back on the cold floor and exhaled deeply. Sweat had formed on his forehead, even though the workshop wasn't warm. His hands were trembling slightly. He had never felt this kind of pressure before. Fixing engines was simple. They didn't feel pain. They didn't look at him with eyes full of fear. But this creature was depending on him. He stayed on the floor for a moment, just breathing, just absorbing everything that had happened. After a while, he stood up again and brought some water in a shallow bowl. He placed it near the leopard, keeping a respectful distance. At first, the animal didn't move. Then slowly, painfully, it lowered its head and took a few small sips. That small action filled him with hope. If the leopard had the strength to drink, it had the strength to fight for survival. He turned on a small heater in the corner of the workshop. The night was getting colder, and he didn't want the animal to shiver or weaken further. He positioned the heater so the warmth reached the leopard without being too close. Then he sat on his stool nearby, keeping watch. Time passed slowly. He could hear crickets outside and the soft hum of the heater. The leopard closed its eyes, but didn't fully sleep. Every now and then, it opened them again and glanced toward him, making sure he was still there. The mechanic didn't leave the workshop that night. He didn't even think about going home. His eyes felt heavy, but he forced himself to stay awake. He kept checking the leopard from time to time, adjusting the blanket, making sure the splints stayed in place. Hours passed like that, in silence and slow breaths. Some moments felt unreal. He wasn't a wildlife expert. He wasn't a hero. He was just a simple man who fixed engines. Yet here he was, sharing the same room with one of the rarest animals on Earth, doing everything he could to give it a chance to live in the middle of the night. The leopard shifted slightly, then settled back down. Its head rested against the blanket, and for the first time since he found it, the animal looked a little more at peace. He felt something warm in his chest, something like relief mixed with gratitude. As the early hours of morning approached, he leaned back on the stool and looked around his workshop. Nothing had changed here. Same tools, same walls, same smell of machine oil. But inside him, something had already shifted. This wasn't just about saving an animal. It was about discovering a part of himself he didn't know existed. A part that cared deeply. A part that listened to silent cries. A part that acted even when afraid. He watched the sleeping leopard and whispered, "You're going to be all right. I won't let anything happen to you." And in that quiet moment, he knew his life had already started to change, even though he didn't yet understand how far that change would go. The morning light slowly crept into the workshop, touching the walls one by one, until it reached the blanket where the injured albino leopard lay. The mechanic, who had barely slept, lifted his head when he felt the shift in brightness. His back hurt from sitting in the same position for hours, and his eyes stung from staying awake all night, but he didn't complain. His attention stayed on the animal, resting only a few feet away. The leopard was still breathing, still alive, and for the mechanic, that alone felt like a small miracle. He stood up slowly, stretching his stiff legs, and walked toward the animal with careful steps. The leopard opened its eyes halfway, looking at him with a mixture of pain and trust. It didn't growl or show fear anymore, which told him that the animal had accepted his presence. "Good morning," he said quietly. As if talking to an old friend, he knelt down and checked the splint he had put on the night before. The cloth was still in place, and the leg looked a bit less swollen. He didn't know if the treatment was perfect, but at least he had stopped the bleeding and supported the broken bone. He hoped that was enough. The air inside the workshop was cold, so he adjusted the heater to a slightly warmer level. Then he poured a little fresh water into the shallow bowl and placed it near the leopard's head. He waited patiently until the animal slowly reached forward and took a few weak sips. He smiled softly. It was a good sign. A very good sign. He walked to the back of the workshop and grabbed a few old sheets. He folded them neatly and placed them under the blanket to make the surface softer. He knew the leopard needed rest, comfort, and warmth. He didn't have the best tools for caring for wildlife, but he gave everything he had. All morning, he kept checking the leopard, walking back and forth between small tasks. He didn't take any new repair jobs that day. He couldn't. His mind was focused on the silent creature that depended on him. He remembered the vet's instructions. Keep the place quiet, avoid sudden movements, and watch closely for signs of infection or distress. So he did exactly that. He moved like a shadow, speaking in low tones and avoiding any loud noise. Even when he used tools, he tried to make sure nothing clattered or fell. Every few hours, he cleaned the cloth around the injured leg with warm water, keeping the wound free from dirt. Sometimes the leopard let out soft whimpers, and the sound went straight to his heart. He wished he could explain to the animal that he wasn't trying to hurt it, only help it. So he kept speaking softly. "It's all right. You're strong. You'll get through this." The leopard seemed to listen. It watched him with calm, half-lidded eyes every time he approached. Sometimes it blinked slowly, a small sign of acceptance. He didn't know much about wild animals, but he understood one thing. Trust is earned slowly, and he was earning it moment by moment. By afternoon, he realized he needed to feed the leopard somehow. But what could he give it? He didn't have special wildlife food. He didn't want to give it anything that could harm it. He called the vet again, who explained that a weakened leopard could handle small portions of soft meat if offered carefully. The mechanic nodded, thanked him again, and hung up. He went to his small kitchen corner and prepared a small bowl of broth. Nothing spicy, nothing heavy, just warm water with a little softened meat. He wasn't sure if the leopard would accept it, but he placed the bowl near the blanket and stepped back. The leopard sniffed the air, lifted its head slightly, and slowly leaned forward. Its tongue touched the broth, taking a tiny sip. Then another. Relief washed over him. The creature was fighting. It wanted to survive. For the first time in years, the mechanic felt something inside him shift. He had lived so many quiet days that he had forgotten what it felt like to care for something living, something fragile. Taking care of this leopard made him feel alive in a way he couldn't explain. Every small improvement in the animal gave him strength. As the day continued, he cleaned the workshop floor, making sure there was no oil or metal scraps near the area where the leopard rested. He opened the small window so a bit of fresh air could enter. The sunlight filtered through, landing on the leopard's white fur, making it look almost magical. The spots on its coat shimmered faintly, as if the animal carried a piece of moonlight inside it. He stopped and stared for a moment, amazed at the beauty of the creature. He whispered softly, "I never thought I'd see an animal like you, not even in a dream." The leopard blinked slowly, as if acknowledging his words. As the hours passed, the mechanic found himself speaking more freely. He talked about ordinary things, how the workshop had been his life for many years. how he spent most days fixing machines, and how he never expected anything exciting to happen in his quiet town. He told the leopard about the forest behind the workshop, about the birds that perched on the roof, and about the peaceful evenings he usually enjoyed. Talking made him feel calmer. And maybe, in some strange way, it made the leopard feel calmer too. The animal's breathing grew steadier, and its body relaxed a little more with each passing hour. During the quiet afternoon, he sat on the floor near the animal, not too close, but close enough for the leopard to feel his presence. He didn't work on any machines. He didn't take any calls. His eyes stayed focused on the creature that needed him. As evening approached, he prepared fresh water again and changed the cloth wraps. The leopard flinched when he touched the wound, but it didn't try to pull away. It trusted him enough to stay still. He worked slowly, whispering small reassurances every few seconds. Almost done. Hold on, you're doing well. After he finished, he sat back and exhaled deeply. The sky outside had turned orange again, and the workshop was bathed in soft light. He turned on the small lamp that sat on his work table, casting a warm glow over the entire room. The leopard rested peacefully now, its breathing steady, its eyes closed. The mechanic felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time, a sense of purpose. Not the kind that came from fixing a machine or completing a job, but the kind that came from protecting a life. Night returned slowly. The mechanic heated some soup for himself, but he ate quietly, without taking his eyes off the leopard for long. He didn't want to miss any sign of trouble. He felt responsible in a way he couldn't explain. Hours passed, and the workshop grew quiet again. The heater hummed softly. The night breeze rustled through the trees outside. And inside, a man and a rare, injured animal shared the same space with a strange sense of understanding. At one point, the leopard shifted slightly and opened its eyes. Its gaze met his. They didn't need words. The moment felt deep enough without them. You're safe, the mechanic whispered gently. The leopard blinked softly, then rested its head again. The mechanic felt his heart warm in a way he couldn't put into words. He stayed awake for most of the night, checking the animal again and again, making sure the splint was steady, making sure it wasn't trembling, making sure the wound wasn't getting worse. Every time he leaned close, he spoke softly, keeping the animal calmed by the early hours of dawn. The animal was sleeping more peacefully than it had since he found it. The mechanic leaned against the wall, tired but hopeful. He knew the journey wasn't over. The leg would take weeks to heal. The leopard would need food, warmth, and safety. It would need time, and he was ready to give all of it, even if it meant changing his entire routine. He looked at the sleeping creature and whispered one last sentence before closing his eyes for a short rest. You're not alone. I'll take care of you. And in that silent moment, under the soft glow of dawn, a quiet bond deepened between a simple human and a rare wild creature, one that neither of them fully understood yet, but one that would shape both their lives forever. For a long time, he wondered what happened to the albino leopard after it was taken away for treatment. He had seen the animal only once hurt, scared, and struggling to walk, yet that one moment had stayed in his mind for years. Sometimes, when he sat alone in his small workshop at night, he would catch himself thinking about those pale eyes that had looked at him with a strange mix of fear and trust. He had helped many machines in his life, fixed broken engines, repaired loud generators, even brought rusty old parts back to life. But helping a wild creature had been something completely different. It had touched his heart in a way he didn't expect. Life had moved on. His days were still filled with the same smell of grease, diesel, and warm metal. His customers were the usual people from nearby villages who came to him whenever their tractors, motorcycles, or old Jeeps stopped working. He worked honestly because he liked the small joy of seeing someone's machine start again. It made people happy, and their happiness made him proud. But even with all of this, a part of him still remembered that injured animal limping through the broken branches in the forest. He didn't talk about it much because he didn't want people to think he was imagining things. Not everyone believed an albino leopard existed in their area. Some said he must have seen a dog with a skin condition. Others laughed softly as if he had confused a normal wild leopard with something unusual. But he knew what he had seen that day. He remembered every detail: the soft white fur, the faint spots, the slow but determined steps, and the quiet sound it made as if it was asking for help without speaking. Sometimes he wished he could know if the leopard survived. But he didn't have time to go into the forest again. His work kept him busy, and he couldn't just leave his workshop whenever he wanted. He had responsibilities. He had people depending on him to get their machines fixed, and he was not the kind of man who broke promises. One afternoon, something unexpected happened. A group of wildlife officers came to the village. People had gathered around them because official vehicles rarely came to that area unless something important was happening. He was standing near the entrance of his workshop, watching from a distance, when one of the officers looked directly at him and walked forward. "You're the mechanic who helped us years ago, right?" the officer asked. He nodded slowly. He didn't know if he should feel surprised or nervous. He rarely got attention from any officials, so this moment felt unusual. The officer smiled. "We never got the chance to thank you properly," he said. "That leopard you helped, it survived." The mechanic blinked in disbelief. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. After years of wondering, the answer he wanted was suddenly standing right in front of him. The officer continued speaking, explaining how the animal had received treatment for its broken leg, how it had recovered slowly, and how it had been released into a protected area where it could live without danger. Hearing this gave the mechanic a strange warm feeling inside, a mix of relief and happiness. He didn't know the animal personally, and the animal didn't know him, yet their brief meeting had connected them in a way that stayed with him for years. Knowing it was alive made everything feel lighter. But then the officer said something else, something that made the mechanic's calm heart beat faster. "We are doing a long-term health check on all rescued animals," the officer said, "and we thought maybe you'd like to come see it. You played an important part in its survival." At first, the mechanic didn't understand. "See it?" he asked quietly. "Yes, if you want to," the officer replied. He didn't answer for a long moment. His hands tightened slightly, as if unsure how to respond. He wasn't used to being invited anywhere important. He wasn't a doctor, not a wildlife expert, not a researcher. He was just a man who spent his days fixing carburetors and adjusting fuel pipes. Why would anyone want him to visit a protected wildlife area? The officer noticed his hesitation. "You don't have to talk or do anything," he said softly. "Just come. Just see how well it's doing. Sometimes people deserve to see the result of their kindness." Those words touched the mechanic deeply. He finally nodded, agreeing to go. The next day, he woke up earlier than usual. The morning air was cold, and the sky was a soft gray. He washed up quickly, changed into clean clothes, and locked his workshop. As he walked toward the waiting jeep, he felt strangely nervous, like a child going somewhere new for the first time. He wasn't sure what he would say or how he would feel. The wildlife team welcomed him warmly. They explained where they were taking him and how far the protected area was. He listened quietly, absorbing everything but saying little. He liked to observe more than talk. The road ahead was long filled, with winding paths and rough patches, but he didn't mind. Each kilometer brought him closer to an answer he had waited years to find. The forest slowly changed color as they went deeper. The tall trees became thicker, the air cooler, and the sound of nature louder. Birds called from branches, and leaves rustled gently. It felt like entering a different world, one untouched, peaceful, and full of life. When they reached the designated observation area, the team asked him to stand behind a wooden barrier for safety. They assured him the animal would appear soon. He waited quietly, his heart beating with a mix of hope and nervousness. Minutes passed. Then the bushes on the opposite side moved slightly. He held his breath. A pale shape stepped forward. It was the albino leopard. Even after all these years, he recognized it instantly. Its fur was still white like fresh cotton, its faint spots visible only when the light touched it just right. Its body looked healthy now, strong and confident. The limp was gone. It walked with grace, almost like a moving cloud among the trees. The mechanic's chest tightened with emotion. He didn't expect to feel something so strong, but seeing the animal alive and well brought back every memory from that day. The leopard didn't notice him at first. It looked around calmly, sniffing the air. Then, for a brief second, its eyes turned in his direction. Those same pale eyes he remembered. It stared quietly, almost as if trying to recall something from long ago. The mechanic didn't move. He didn't speak. He simply watched with a soft expression, grateful for this rare moment. The leopard remained still for a few seconds, then slowly turned and walked deeper into the trees, disappearing into the forest with the same quiet elegance. The mechanic let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. Something inside him felt complete. He didn't need words. He didn't need applause. Just knowing the animal had survived and seeing it with his own eyes was enough to fill him with a sense of peace he hadn't felt in a long time. The wildlife officer placed a gentle hand on the mechanic's shoulder. "Now you've seen it," he said. "You did something good, and the forest remembered." The mechanic didn't reply. He just smiled, a soft, humble smile that carried years of silent hope. On the way back, he looked out the window of the Jeep, watching the trees pass by. He felt lighter, calmer, almost as if a burden had quietly lifted from his heart. He had fixed many things in his life, but saving that one creature, even by accident, even just for a moment, was something he would never forget. And now, for the first time in years, he felt grateful not just for what he did, but for the chance to see the result of his kindness with his own eyes. It had been several years since the mechanic had last seen the albino leopard. Life had returned to its quiet rhythm engines. Gears and metal scraps filled his days, and the forest beyond his workshop remained a distant, familiar presence. Though he thought about the leopard often, the memory had slowly become a gentle echo, like a dream that was fading but never entirely gone. He had never expected to see it again. After all, it was a wild creature, free to roam the forest as it pleased. The thought of it living safely in the protected area was comforting enough. One night, however, everything changed. He had finished a long day of work, fixing an old tractor engine for a farmer who lived nearby. The sun had already set, and the workshop was quiet. He was tidying up his tools, stacking wrenches neatly, and wiping off grease from the tables. Outside, the forest was silent, the only sound the faint rustling of leaves in the cool night breeze. He leaned against the workbench for a moment, stretching his tired back, and then noticed a movement near the edge of the clearing dot. At first, he thought it was just a deer or a fox. Animals often came close to the village at night, but something about the movement felt different, slower, heavier, more deliberate. His heart began to race slightly as he squinted into the darkness. The shape moved with surprising grace, and then he realized it. The pale, almost glowing fur he had hoped to see for years. The albino leopard was standing there, looking straight at him. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The leopard didn't rush, didn't growl, and didn't run. It simply stood, strong, calm, and confident, yet unmistakably aware of his presence. Its eyes met his, and for the first time in years, he felt that silent connection he had experienced when he first found it hurt and helpless. But now it was fully grown, majestic, and completely free. He froze, unsure whether to speak or move. Fear wasn't part of it. He had learned the animal could be dangerous, but there was no sign of aggression. Instead, there was recognition, a quiet acknowledgement that this human had once cared, once risked everything to help. His chest tightened with emotion. He had thought he would never see it again, and now it was here, as if remembering him just as vividly. The leopard took a few steps closer, its movements deliberate, slow, and careful. The moonlight reflected on its white fur, making it appear almost ethereal. Its faint spots glimmered faintly, subtle and beautiful. He felt awe rise in him. This was the rarest creature he had ever seen, standing right in front of him, alive and thriving because of the care he had given so many years ago. Then he noticed something moving behind the leopard. His eyes widened. Small shapes emerged from the shadows, 3 little cubs, following their mother cautiously. They were tiny, fragile, and pale like their parent, their fur almost glowing under the moonlight. The sight made his chest tighten even more. The leopard had survived, healed, and even started a family. It was stronger now than he had ever imagined. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He simply watched, overwhelmed by the miracle of life unfolding before him. For years, he had wondered whether his small act of kindness had made any difference. Now, the answer was clear. Not only had the leopard survived, but it had also thrived, carrying forward the future in the form of its cubs. The leopard approached slowly, stopping just a few meters away. Its eyes remained on him, calm but alert. For a moment, he felt the weight of their silent conversation, unspoken but understood. He had saved its life once, and now it was here, offering a quiet thankfulness, a recognition that he had mattered. His hands trembled slightly. He wasn't used to emotions so powerful. Most days he fixed machines, not lives, but this. This was different. The cubs stayed behind their mother, shyly peeking from the bush. Their little faces were curious, their eyes wide, but they didn't approach. The mother watched over them carefully, protective yet calm. He could see the intelligence in her eyes, the knowledge that she could protect herself and her family, and he marveled at the strength of a wild creature surviving against the odds. He remembered the day he first found her, struggling with the broken leg. She had been vulnerable, fragile, and scared. He had held her, cared for her, and watched over her in those crucial hours. Now she was the embodiment of resilience, carrying new life and thriving in the forest he had once feared to enter. The sight filled him with awe, pride, and a deep sense of gratitude. As he watched, the mother leopard did something unexpected. She stepped slightly closer, not aggressively, but with a calm, deliberate pace. Her head lowered subtly, almost as if acknowledging him. His heart skipped a beat. It was a gesture he would never forget, the silent bond between human and wild animal, a connection born from trust, care, and survival. He took a slow step forward, just one, careful not to startle her. She didn't move. Instead, she remained still, watching him, her gaze steady and calm. It was a moment of pure understanding. No words were needed. He understood her gratitude, and she understood his care. The cubs peeked out again, seeing the humans standing quietly, and then huddled close to their mother. They didn't come forward, but they were observing, learning from their mother's cautious but trusting behavior. For a long time, he simply stood there, observing. The night felt sacred. The air was cool, the stars were faint above the trees, and the forest seemed to hold its breath. Every movement of the mother leopard was deliberate, careful, full of quiet elegance. She was a living reminder of resilience and trust, of survival against odds. and a lasting impact of kindness. After a while, the mother turned, signaling to her cubs. Slowly, deliberately, they began to move together toward the forest. He could see her guiding them carefully, protecting them, teaching them silently how to navigate the wild. Occasionally, she would glance back at him, and he felt a rush of emotion. This was her way of showing that everything was well, that life was continuing, that she was safe, and that the small human who had once saved her had earned a place in her memory. He stayed still, letting them move away. He didn't call, didn't try to follow, didn't make a sound. This was not his world anymore. It was theirs. The forest, the night, and the moonlight belonged to them. And he was a quiet observer, a witness to their freedom and survival. The leopard and her cubs disappeared into the shadows, moving gracefully and silently into the depths of the forest. For a long moment, he stayed where he was, absorbing everything he had just witnessed. His chest felt tight with emotion, his eyes slightly wet, and a quiet smile appeared on his lips. He had expected nothing, hoped little, and yet he had been given the greatest reward a human could receive, a living, breathing testament to the power of care and trust. He finally turned back toward his workshop, the cool night air brushing against his face. Every sound of the forest now felt like a reminder of that small act of kindness years ago. He felt lighter, calmer, and more connected to the world around him. The leopard had returned, not for help this time, but to show that life continued, that the bond between human and wild creature was unbroken, and that every effort mattered. When he entered his workshop, the tools and machines seemed smaller, less important. They were still part of his life, but they could never compare to what he had just witnessed. He sat on a stool for a long time, staring at nothing, reflecting on the night's events. He understood something deeply: kindness, even in small acts, could leave lasting marks. Life had a way of remembering, of coming full circle, and sometimes miracles came quietly, in the form of pale eyes and a gentle glance from a creature he had once saved. That night, he slept better than he had in years. The forest outside seemed to hum softly, the sound of leaves and distant nocturnal creatures like a lullaby. And in his dreams, the albino leopard and her cubs walked freely, strong and alive, a living reminder of hope, resilience, and the quiet power of one person's care. Years had passed since the mechanic first rescued the albino leopard. His life had settled into its usual rhythm, the familiar smells of grease and metal filling his workshop each day. He had grown used to quiet evenings, the occasional sound of wildlife in the distance, and the slow passage of time in his small town. Even though life was peaceful, he often thought of the leopard, the fragile, beautiful creature he had found hurt and struggling so many years ago. Its pale eyes haunted his memory, and he sometimes wondered whether it had survived, whether it had managed to find its way back to the wild safely. He never expected that one quiet night would change everything. It was late in the evening. The sky was dark, with a sliver of moonlight peeking through scattered clouds. The workshop had been quiet for hours, and he was finishing the last repairs of the day. His hands were covered in oil, and the familiar ache of muscles used for lifting heavy engine parts reminded him that he had worked hard all day. Outside, the forest loomed dark and still, as if holding its breath. He stepped out for a moment, stretching, and then froze. There, at the edge of the clearing, stood a pale figure. At first, he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. The light from the workshop made shadows dance in the trees, and his tired mind could have imagined anything. But as he blinked and focused, he realized it was real. The albino leopard stood still, its white fur glowing faintly under the moonlight, its faint spots visible in the pale illumination. The animal was larger now, fully grown, its body strong and graceful, moving with a quiet confidence that only a survivor could have. His chest tightened with emotion. He had not expected to see it again. And now, after all these years, it was here, looking at him with eyes that seemed to recognize him. He froze in place, unsure whether to call out, "Move closer," or simply watch. He remembered the day he had first carried the leopard into his workshop. How fragile and weak it had been. Its broken leg, its soft cries, its cautious eyes, all of it returned to him in vivid detail. And now, seeing it alive, thriving, and free, he felt a deep, overwhelming sense of gratitude and awe. Then he noticed movement behind the leopard. 3 small shapes emerged slowly from the shadow's cubs, tiny and delicate, their pale fur shining faintly in the moonlight. They stayed close to their mother, peeking out with wide, curious eyes. The sight made his heart tighten even more. The leopard had survived, healed, and now had a family. Life had continued, and it was strong. He did not move or speak. There was no need for words. The mother leopard stepped forward slowly, deliberately, her eyes never leaving him. For a long moment, he felt a silent understanding between them, a connection that did not require speech. She had remembered him. She had not forgotten the human who had saved her when she was weak and in pain. The cubs followed her carefully, small and tentative, learning from her every movement. She guided them through the clearing with grace, teaching them silently how to navigate the world around them. He watched in awe, understanding that he was witnessing something rare, not just survival, but life moving forward, strengthened by care and trust. For several minutes, he stood there, rooted to the ground, watching them. He thought about all the quiet days he had spent in his workshop, about the countless machines he had repaired, about the simple life he had led. None of it compared to this moment, the moment when he realized that his small act of kindness had lasting consequences, that saving one life had ripple effects that continued far beyond his imagination. The mother leopard moved closer, stopping just a few meters away. She lowered her head slightly, in a gesture so subtle, yet so meaningful, it brought tears to his eyes. He understood it as a silent thank you, a recognition that he had mattered, that he had given her a chance to live, to grow, to create a family. The cubs peeked from behind her legs, shy but curious, learning from the bond between their mother and this human. He took a slow, careful step forward. The leopard did not flee. She remained still, alert but calm. A connection between them was unspoken but powerful. He remembered the fear, the struggle, and the hours he had spent keeping her alive. And now he saw the full result, a living, breathing testament to survival and trust. The leopard and her cubs lingered for a few more moments, then began to move deeper into the forest. She glanced back once, a brief look that seemed to say, "I am alive, I am well, and you made a difference." The cubs followed closely, their tiny forms moving gracefully through the underbrush, learning from their mother how to survive and thrive. He stayed where he was, letting them disappear into the shadows. He didn't call, didn't move, didn't make a sound. This was their world now, their forest, their life. He was merely an observer, a witness to the miracle of nature, and he felt honored to be a part of it, even in such a small way. As he walked back toward his workshop, he felt a calmness he had never known before. The machines, the engines, the everyday worries, all of them seemed small compared to the experience he had just witnessed. Life had a quiet way of reminding him of what mattered most: care, compassion, and the bonds that connect living beings. When he reached the workshop, he leaned against the doorframe, closing his eyes for a moment. The forest around him was alive with the soft sounds of night creatures, the rustle of leaves, and the distant calls of nocturnal birds. It all felt serene, peaceful, and alive. He had given life once, and life had returned to him in the most unexpected and beautiful way. That night, as he sat in the quiet of his workshop, he thought about the journey he had taken. He remembered the first moment he had seen the leopard, how small and fragile it had been, and how much care it had required. He remembered the long nights of watching, feeding, and tending to the broken leg. And now, years later, he had seen the leopard alive, strong, and with a family of her own. He realized that the effort, the worry, the sleepless nights, all of it had been worth it. He smiled softly, thinking about the lessons he had learned, that even a small act of kindness could change the course of a life. That trust, once earned, could last far beyond expectation, and that the world, in its quiet and unexpected ways, had a way of showing gratitude not with words, but with life itself. As he finally went to bed that night, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He had repaired engines, he had helped people, but this experience had given him something much greater, the knowledge that one person's care could leave a lasting mark on the world. And in his dreams, he saw the albino leopard and her cubs moving through the forest, alive, free, and thriving, a reminder that hope, kindness, and courage could make all the difference. From that day on, every glance at the forest reminded him that life was full of surprises, that courage and compassion mattered, and that the smallest choices could ripple far beyond what anyone could imagine. He continued his work, his quiet life, but he carried within him a secret joy, a connection to a rare creature who had not forgotten him, and who had returned years later to show him the power of life, survival, and gratitude. The memory of that night stayed with him forever. And even as time went on, the story of the albino leopard, her cubs, and the simple mechanic who had saved her remained in his heart, a tale of trust, care, and the quiet miracles that life offers to those willing to act when it matters most.